So this is another, I call it a color filter or color screen animation of a pattern that emerged from the Archimedes spiral patterns that I've been interested in. I don't have much of an explanation as to the way in which I overlapped this picture. You can, I guess, refer to a previous video where I describe more in detail how I come about the patterns. I guess the only thing I will say is that it's derived from pretty much a singular picture of Archimedes spirals, a series of them wrapped around a circle basically, though it's a circle planar, it's a planar circle, but imagine three-dimensionally, and all the spirals don't share a common center, though they are oriented around a common center. And I'm not saying that's right, that's just the way I did it and envisioned it at the time, and it's quite likely wrong, but it's still just because of the, I guess, harmonious relationships associated with such a essential geometric pattern that all these other patterns emerge. And it's basically a two-dimensional version of connected dots, where the childhood game of connected dots is a linear thing. With this, it's overlapping a two-dimensional pattern, intersplicing it with itself over and over and over and over and over again, and using negatives and rotations and vacuities and condensations, essentially at points or in different shapes, happen. And it almost a lot, these images, I wouldn't say build themselves, but they half build themselves, or maybe 51% build themselves, because just moving something over itself until it clicks, until it falls into itself, like a belt. You just slide the buckle, and the latch falls into a notch. So that's how I built these images. That's how I built this image. And then, whereas I do have images of rotations, more of a structural animation. I have a few structural animations, but I have more color filter animations, and what interests me about them is the patterns that are saturated in an instant, which to me has a lot to do with eternity. I guess you could say almost like the Big Bang. Which I guess in some senses, it's still debated, the Big Bang, the nature of the Big Bang, and so on, but basically patterns that are so hypersaturated that they require extension and require time to express the fullness of what they contain. patterns that are so dense that they're, they're dynamically dense, they're temporally dense. The whole idea of the Big Bang, I've also heard it called the Big Whimper, I think. Maybe the Big Ooze would be a good way to think about it too. And then to think that it happened at a point in time is kind of funny, or that it happened in the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. But it would stand to reason that if the Big Bang happened, it happened in the middle of time. And if we're not yet in the middle of time, then the Big Bang hasn't happened yet, which is a kind of funny way to think about it, or that it's always happening. It happened all at once, and that's kind of a lot more the way I think about it. Like, it drips on a paper towel in the rain. It's clear, and then drops fall, and they expand. So it's like happening all at once. I'm not saying I'm right to think about it that way, but a lot of times I think about it that way, that certain points in time and space happen, and then they expand, or then, So like in my mind, something that happened at 5000 BC, at 10 BC, at 300 AD, at 1700 AD, and yesterday. Those are all like a moment after the Big Bang. And then, to either side of them, to either side of all those moments are like the next moment, and to the either side, So there's a lot of things in the past that haven't happened yet, and there's a lot of things in the future that have already happened, and there's a lot of things about tomorrow that have already happened, and there's a lot of things about yesterday that haven't quite happened. Because I think of it as like oscillational resolution. The whole thing with time is it's constantly becoming more resolved, more resolution, or that the oscillations are perturbing finer and finer detail. I don't know if that's quite right, but I think it's an interesting way to think about it. It might be completely wrong. Yeah, one of the things about the Big Bang is the idea that, it's hard to think of space and matter and time all expanding. When we think of space expanding, or when we think of matter expanding, those are two different things. And then to think of, which is expanding faster, and what's the acceleration of each, and could space be dynamic enough to ebb and flow while matter is also expanding in an ebb and flow, and what is the harmony between their ebbing and flowing. But anyway, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I remember once way back I saw a national, when I say way back, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I saw a brief snippet of I think it was a National Geographic documentary, and there was a fellow who was translating the Zohar, which I don't know anything about, except for that it's a Jewish text, which I guess at the time didn't have a really good translation into English. I don't know if it does by now, I haven't even looked, but what really caught me was that one of the first things, I think, in the Zohar, it said that in the beginning God withdrew in all directions. And I thought that was, it's basically the inverse or the opposite idea of the Big Bang, that God was everywhere and withdrew in all directions into, the vacuity of God is what created all the spaces, and that got me thinking about, it's total emptiness, the emptiness of space, no space, and then something created, the Big Bang. It wasn't matter exploding into space, but it was there was nothing, and then space happened, and stuff came into it. But then, that's almost the same thing as a perfect solid.
Right.
Solid, like charge coming into a perfect solid which had not known charge. And I guess that kind of talks about, or that would reference back to the idea that, like the ether, you know, like think like a perfect vacuum or a perfect solid. Like a perfect vacuum would have to be structured because a perfect solid would have to be structured because perfect, like a perfect vacuum with like space or like real matter material things, atoms coming into them. You know, I'm a vortices in the effluvium type guy, and like stuff coming into nothingness would be the same thing as perfect vacuity coming into a perfect solid, an unstructured perfect solid. But a solid would have to be structured. A perfect solid would have to be structured in order that vacuity could enter into it. Because there'd have to be like some sort of nexus. There'd have to be some sort of structure to which like a vacancy would have to condense something. Something would have to condense to produce vacancy, much like something would have to something something would have to expand to create stuff. And it would have to come from somewhere in a certain way. Like a vacuity a vacuity in a perfect solid would have to be some sort of charge distribution. And I guess kind of the same thing could be said about stuff in a nothingness. I guess that pretty much reaches the limit of what I could even poetically talk about. And this is just another example, I guess, of structure. And, you know, that even in a moment or even in stillness, there's, I guess, these color animations kind of show maybe like the potential dynamics or like the tangents as they would express themselves in a plane of force. And it is poetic the way I've done it. But I think it speaks pretty clearly to the type of structure or math or cosmology that is necessary to make any real progress in understanding our place in existence, which is everything.